Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to continue on with special selections this weekend and finish up on this Sunday with a request from Mike Baker. It says, had a few songs on my mind for this, slowly addressed each in time though. We can thank all of the Patreons and the viewers of the show for requesting so many awesome things, I guess. So we're going to take the time to suggest Nils Frahm. The song says it's modern, classical, electronic, something a bit different. I'm excited about that. Many thanks for what you do. Keep it up. All right, so we don't have nearly enough classical on the channel. There's actually a bit of a reason for that. Well, not a reason. It's not like I actively tell people don't recommend me classical music. But classical tends to have a lot more depth to it than rock and metal. And it's a lot harder to talk about on a first listen. So I'm actually a little wary of putting a classical on here. And honestly, nobody's really suggested it yet, so yeah, let's get into this one. We'll see what happens. Classical, electronic. Nils Frahm, I believe, is the composer. I would assume maybe that's a group name. I don't know. And the song is "Says." So we got a nice, like a 6 against 4 thing going on right now. I don't quite know what time signature we're in yet. Maybe not 6 against 4. Actually, I think we're in 6/8. Lots of breathing room. Yeah, beautiful volume playing around with dynamics there. Really letting this opening breathe and come into its own on its own time. Now that we have this sparse melody, though, I'm starting to feel a very slow 4. lot of texture and timbre play with that note right there. So went up at like a third, and then coming back down. That melody just under this strong repeated phrase from the beginning is really nice. Trading off the rise, that's nice. Another 6 against 4. Interesting. Um, Interesting. I think that's the best word. If I were to sum that up into something a bit more generic than it deserves. Interesting. Um, so a lot of that is dynamic play. Like 6 or 7 minutes of that track are the same exact thing. We have the slightly faster moving part that feels like 6/8. Actually, both of these parts feel like 6/8. The faster moving part that sort of sits on the bottom of the track, and then the 2 dotted quarters, I think, and then maybe like a very silent third note. It might just be reverb though. And those two bars, or sorry, those two rhythms in the bar, maybe 2 bars, that might be a 2-bar phrase, are played over and over for 6 to 7 minutes. And a lot of the change in the song is derived from electronic modulation. We see some widening of the notes, we see some distortion of the notes, they play around with volume, they sort of overdrive the tones, and a lot of the story building comes from that. How are they playing around on if you were to look at the sheet music for this, it would be just those two patterns with a repeat sign, then like times 150. There's not really a lot going on paper. There's a lot going on digitally, though, in the way that the notes are played around with. It almost feels like he throws them on loop and then just starts tweaking dials on some sort of mixing board. And I am very torn about this. Longtime listeners know that I kind of have a big deal with performers. I like my music to be performed by people, performed by their instruments. I understand that that's not always the case. Sometimes you can't make music with acoustic instruments the same way that you could make them with digital instruments. And I don't hate it, but there's definitely the performer, the musician part of me that prefers when there's people actually playing the music for you. There's a live component to it. I think I would love to see. Actually, there is. He does have a boiler room performance, and I guess this was done live because of the clapping at the end. But I'd love to see how it was done. Does he have performers playing the same two bars 100 times over, and he is tweaking the audio between the microphone and the time it hits the speakers for the audience? Or is this a backing track that he hit the spacebar on and then started tweaking some dials? That's reductive. I don't. Oh man, that came off real snarky. I don't mean that. I tell you, there's a real strong part of me that does not like music without performance. I'm really trying to curb it. That came out real bad. Um, but yeah, or was this all digital? Was this a backing track and he tweaked it on the fly? Was the tweaking live, or is that set for every song? There's definitely a performance aspect to that, especially if it changes on every performance. I think what really stands out to me here, though, is despite that part of me that's like, nah, no, this is not that great because no one could play this. There's another part of me that says, hey, I was just told a fantastic story, and I'd like to hear it again. And so this puts me in a weird spot. My bread and butter is talking about the musical components, what is on the sheet. Occasionally, I can get into how the performance works, but that's not my super strong suit, and falling back on the theory really helps. And there's not a lot of theory going on here. But I do want to talk about thematic elements and musical narration. This is a song that is not going to grab everybody. I would probably even say it's going to bounce off of a lot of people. There really is not a lot going on, especially for the first 4-ish minutes. It really takes some time for the song to build into something. And normally, as we discovered last week with shoegaze and weeks prior with post rock and post metal, I'm not somebody who's real big on songs really sitting in a pocket. I like to have momentum and movement and direction to my music. Um, that's not always the case. Sometimes a song can emotionally resonate with me, but that's usually after I learn the lyrics, and it's difficult for me to enter that on a first time listen. Um, So, actually, to be clear for anybody who's new around here, these reactions are not necessarily great indicators of my casual listening. The way that I listen to a song for the first time is very different than the way I would listen to a song on the fifth time. Uh, First of all, I don't really listen to lyrics on a first time listen, so that's kind of a big one. However, on the first time listen, I'm prone to listen to a lot of theoretical aspects. I'm looking for time signature changes. I'm listening for key changes. I'm listening for raises in chord progressions. Did we just enter the chorus again, but we raise it up a third, giving it a sense of movement and growth. Things like that. How are melodies working with each other? Counterpoint. So I don't really get to engage emotionally with music too often. Not in this reaction sphere in these types of videos. However, this song does something special. It's repetitive. And I don't have much analytical aspect to think about, so I kind of fall into a more emotional aspect. And that's where this comes in. This song feels like a flower to me. Maybe not everybody gets that. I don't know if anybody has, I don't know how many of you have raised plants, flowers, vines, fruits, vegetables. It takes a long time. Um, and I kind of feel that with this song, not just specifically because it takes a long time. There's components to this song that give me the idea of the life cycle of a plant. The intro is very sparse, very quiet, and it reminds me very much of seed life. Slowly gaining nutrients, roots coming out, stem building, slowly turning into a seedling. Um, and then, even once you begin to grow your stem and the plant grows a bit more and it ends up getting the bulb, the sepal, the part of where the flower will eventually bloom from. Um, and this is still a very muted experience. It's taken a while to get here, depending on the plant. It could take days, maybe even a week or two of just constant nurturing, and it's a very quiet, subdued growth. You don't really see much going on yet. However, when the flower blooms, it's kind of this moment. Like, yeah, dude, it happened. I raised this thing. It's blooming now. It's taken a while to get here, and my work that I was putting into raising this thing never really felt like it was rewarded yet. And then you get to see the flower bloom, and it's gorgeous, and it smells nice. And yeah, there's a big reward to that, I feel. And I kind of got that around the 6 minute mark when we finally, after such a muted buildup, we were playing around with, short bursts of growth. Maybe that was the time when, a leaf sprouted or the stem rose in a noticeable manner. You're like, oh yeah, I can see the growth in this one. Usually, they grow so slowly, you don't see the growth day to day. It's more of, when you look back on pictures a week ago and you're like, yeah, there's difference there, but your moment to moment, you don't really notice the growth. Um, and then finally, like the 6 or 7 minutes mark, when we explode and the song really opens up and we start adding more layers and the volume has risen, multiple decibels above where we started. There's this explosion of happiness and triumph and glee, and there's all these like really positive emotions there. We have new layers added in. There's like a string synth going on. Maybe it's real strings. I don't know. This is classical electronic, so I'm not really sure what parts are acoustic instruments and which parts are digital. Um, but yeah, we get a nice string part with long held out notes to act as a nice foundation to the more rhythmic aspects that we see continue on from the beginning, but in new ways. I think the two tones actually swap, and the faster run part is played on a different tone. At least that's what it sounded like to me. That faster part gets a little bit more volume to it. It gets some spotlight, and you can actually hear a couple pauses in it now. It's a beautiful, beautiful section that was very subdued in the quieter section. I think a lot of the nuance could not be heard, at least to me, until it got louder. It's like the beauty couldn't be fully appreciated until it bloomed. Ah. um, So yeah, and then of course every flower's job is to eventually um, create a seed, or sorry, create a fruit, and the fruit will bear seeds, and then the flower dies. And that's the ending of the song. It goes to black. There's triumph, and the triumph leads to nothingness. And that's what I got out of the song is sort of the life cycle of a flower. And it resonated. It's weird. That's like not the story I was going to expect to think about on a Sunday evening, but here we are. Um, and I love it. Like I said, this doesn't get to happen too often because we do listen to a lot of technical stuff, and even some of the more monotonous drony stuff tends to just bounce off of me in a way that I don't, even when I try to engage emotionally, maybe I kind of see where everything's going and I can turn the analytical side off because the song is stagnating, it's sitting in one spot. The songs still, as more of a casual listener, still bounce off of me when I turn the analytical side off. And this one, it's just one of those lucky situations where it stuck with me. I don't know. Um, I don't know if it's a song I would come back to in the future. It's definitely a song you gotta be in the mood for, and as someone who's not a real big fan of ridiculously long slow burns and monotony on this level, I don't mind those concepts as tools in a toolbox. But when you focus, an 8-minute song on monotony and droning and sitting in a single idea, it tends to bounce off of me as a casual listener. Just my personal bias in what I enjoy out of music in my personal time. But I am very, very glad to have heard this song, especially today. Like I said, it's a rare circumstance for this to happen. Maybe if this had been next week, I might not have felt the same way. Whatever my headspace is in right now led me to that, and because of that uh, emotional resonance, I enjoyed it a lot. So that is Nils Frahm. The song is Says. My personal experience is probably not what was intended by Nils Frahm, or Fram. I'm not really sure how to pronounce that. But it is my experience with the song, and everybody has their own experiences with music. It doesn't mean that if it's not the intended one, doesn't mean that it's the wrong experience. Um, and it's art, and everybody's going to see different things in it. So I am kind of interested in what Nils Frame from, whether that's the composer or the group, what their intentions were and what the word says has to do with this. I suppose the metaphor of slow growth into a big explosion and eventually a petering out could be an analogy for a lot of things, honestly. It could also be a thing for, a musical analogy for the Big Bang. Big Bang. You don't know. But that's where it sits for me. This is where you guys come in. No, those are my thoughts. Hit me up with yours. Let me know what you thought of Nils Fromm's Says. If you enjoyed it or if you didn't, if there's any elements that really stuck with you. How do you feel about my experience with it and the flower metaphor? I don't know. Hit me up. Let me know your thoughts. It's also a description box with some links adjacent to the channel, Patreon, Discord, Twitter, etc. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I will be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC, starting next week's revisit of Instrumental Week. I'm excited for it. We got some pretty big names that are probably going to be starting the week. Actually, no, it's Sunday. Polls are closed. We have some big names that are starting the week. I had some guesses, some stuff that's sitting on the top. Before I checked before the voting closed, but I'm pretty sure they're still at the top. So Yeah, Monday and Tuesday I think are going to be pretty big days. The rest of the week's going to be interesting though, so you'll want to stick around for that. Music with no vocals, that's what we're checking out next week. Until next time, remember to be critical and not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.